Hello, everyone. I know we're about a minute out before we're going to get started on level up your security team through automation. My name's Sean Chakravarty. I'll go into my introduction here in a moment, but just wanted to say hello to everyone. I hope you're having a great day. And like I said, we'll get started here in just a few moments. All right, everyone. It's the top of the hour, 10 o'clock a.m. here where I am in the Western United States or the Southwestern United States. Today, like I said, we're going to be talking about level up your security team through automation. Really, the focus of this presentation is talking about automation and how you, as a cybersecurity leader or aspiring leader, can help to build a culture of positive security culture within your organization using automation and potentially also using artificial intelligence, which we'll get into a little bit more here in a moment. Here's our agenda for today. I mentioned that we're going to talk about SOAR specifically and talk about what is security orchestration, automation, and response. And we'll start talking about a little bit of the strategy of how to think about automation from a strategic perspective. Again, as a leader, you need to be looking at what is the overall long-term roadmap for your automation journey? Where are you now? How do you get to where you want to be? And how do you assess that between it? How do you go and bring your successes to leadership? How do you go and show that you're winning with automation or winning with artificial intelligence? Where do you go and show that the investments that are made into some of these technologies are really paying off? Then, how do you get your own team to really buy into the culture as well? Not just your own team, but also teams around you and the overall organization as well. Then lastly, we'll get into some specific case studies about artificial intelligence and how my team has been using AI to augment some of the work that we do and some of the things we're talking about doing in the future as well. So, brief introduction. My name is Sean Chakravarty. I've been with SANS as an instructor for the last few years, and in those years, I've been teaching the LDR 512 class. I also am the senior director of the Cyber Fusion Center for a company called Upwork, if you're familiar with them. My history has been primarily in building security operations centers for large enterprises. I started off about 15 years ago doing that, building a SOC for a large company, and through the years have built SOCs for a lot of different companies. I'd like to joke that I don't know if I found my groove or fell in a rut, but here I am building security programs over the years, and it's been pretty good to me. And then lastly, you will probably hear me commenting about blacksmithing and bladesmithing if you're ever around me for more than 15 minutes, as well as I'll talk your ear off about audiobooks as well. This particular, or the class that I teach is LDR 512. You'll see it right there in the top middle, as well as on the right-hand side of our different cybersecurity leadership triads here at SANS, where we find it to be one of the pivotal cornerstones of our not only transformations cybersecurity leader track, but also our cyber risk officer. It gives people a lot of the foundational knowledge needed to work in the industry, to build programs, to mature programs, to build up existing programs, etc. So really, these are some of the different classes that we have within different areas that might help or will help you to go and grow your overall career within cybersecurity as a leader. By the way, I didn't mention on the last slide, if you have any questions, please feel free to throw them into the chat. I have a very wonderful person, Woo, helping me out with keeping an eye on those questions, and she will keep me aware that we've got questions in there. I like to answer questions as we're going through because it helps me to still have the context in front of me. If there's a question about a particular slide or information on a slide, it helps me to go with that. So don't feel like you're slowing up the conversation or the talk if you interject with a question. So I mentioned that we should talk about strategy first off. You don't just want to go barreling into automation and say, we're just going to go through and start automating over playbooks, because frankly, you start off with that mindset, you're probably going to run into trouble. I've seen a lot of the failures of a automation strategy are where you don't have any clear direction for the team. You just buy a SOAR product, or somebody will buy a SOAR product, say, okay, now go start automating all the things. And it ends up, you end up running into a lot of trouble. We'll talk a little bit more about automate all the things in just a moment, what kind of your strategy is for that. But also understanding what your strategy is will allow you to understand what is the right SOAR platform for you, or what is the right automation that you want to be doing. So if you come in and say, I have a small agile team, or I have a small, very, a quick moving team that that needs to be able to automate quickly, and we need to have very quick adoption. By the way, early adoption helps a lot with getting buy-in from your team and from leadership. Anyone that sees, oh, this is working quickly, will oftentimes be more apt to want to continue to make their own contributions to it. And really getting whole team adoption is ultimately where you want to get to ensure that you have a successful program within automation. So when we were looking at solar platforms originally, we had to kind of weigh the difference between early adoption, quick wins, or a high ceiling for complex workflows, but requires a lot more engineering on the front end and through testing and rolling out, et cetera. And then ultimately as well, if there's some sort of AI or ML capabilities, training those machine learning models, or those AI models, to start being able to realize some of those kind of larger successes, which without those larger success, or without that larger capability, we may not get to that higher level, but we may get to a level of capability a lot earlier with just the early adoption. And then also, you should be thinking too about automation doesn't just benefit your security team. You can be talking to a lot of the teams around you, and the work that you do with those teams outside of your internal security team, and how you can go and make improvements for others. And I'll have a good use case for that when we talk about specifically CTI using generative AI and automation, and how my team, a very talented team, went and built out some CTI capabilities using generative AI as well. And then obviously cost. You have to make sure that you have appropriate budget for it. And it's not just, oh, can you afford this? It's also, if I short myself on what I'm buying, and I buy a SOAR platform that's lacking in capabilities, people are going to get frustrated with it really quickly. Or if I buy the wrong platform, because I just didn't, because I went to throw a bunch of money at it, and it's overly complex, well, then you can also run into issues as well. So making sure that you have the appropriate budget for the appropriate platform. I mentioned SOAR, security orchestration, automation, and response, and it wouldn't be a SANS presentation if we didn't reference Gartner, because obviously, we respect the research that they do, and the information that they put out as well. But really, it goes through to define what SOAR actually is. And I'm sure many of you have worked on SOAR platforms. There's also something too that we're going to talk about quite a bit more in just a little bit, which is keeping in mind too that there's a lot of different platforms that will have some sort of bolt-on automation capability. That's not a dedicated SOAR platform, or it's not a true SOAR capability. It might just be something that some vendor has kind of put in some capability for doing some sort of automated workflows, and that may or may not end up uh, being the right capability for you. And I'm not arguing against that. If that's the capability that you have, that's fine. If that's the strategy that you want to go with, that's fine. And sometimes if you already have a platform in place or a technology in place that has the capability to do some sort of automation, you say, this meets our needs, go with it. If it's the right size, use it. However, just trying to understand what some of the capabilities are out there right now for SOAR. We'll get to all of those capabilities in just a moment. Now, for us, the maturity path that we followed kind of looks like this. Originally we were working on manual workflows. Everything was done in accordance with our playbook, where we, went through these manual. And by the way, we can say too that we have some workflows within our case management system that may kick off something else or notify somebody else. Okay, those are some kind of minor things that we had in place, but really at the end of the day, for the most part, our triage, our investigation, our mitigation, et cetera, was all being done manually a few years back. Then there were a few teams that had some ad hoc scripts within our security program. Okay, great. We kind of got to that point. We went into partial automation where we rolled out a SOAR platform, and then we started looking at what components of the workflow can we go through and automate? What sections can we start to chunk out? And I'll talk more about this concept in just a moment. Then we got to more of a proactive automation where we'd receive some sort of threat intelligence, or we'd start doing some alert analysis, and we'd realize, oh, we need to create a new workflow before this alert starts to actually fire. We build a brand new alert based on some CTI, some new exploit comes out in the wild, and we look at, okay, we need to have something in place to not only detect but handle this. And we don't just want to go through this entirely manually. We have the capability to go and automate that workflow before we even see the threat show up. And then the last one here on the far right is full automated response. How do we have an entire workflow that goes from the very beginning all the way through closing the ticket without anyone ever having to touch that ticket? And how do we get metrics based on what that work or what work has been done? So not only can we audit and make sure that our workflow is correctly handling things, but ensure that we know the benefit that it's also providing. We'll talk a little bit more about that as well. I mentioned that we would be talking a lot about the different SOAR platforms that are out there right now. A lot of these different platforms all have their own benefits. They all have their own capabilities, their advantages, disadvantages, etc. And we evaluated quite a few of these, as well as I've used quite a few of these in my career. And even on top of that, too, what I've seen is that one SOAR will be really, really, really great. And it'll be the only answer that I have, the only answer that I want, the only solution for my team. And then a couple of years later, due to maybe it being bought by another company, or maybe it being just overdeveloped or underdeveloped or things like that, I start to look at it and start to go, well, you know what? It's not really keeping up with my needs. There needs to be a regular review of your SOAR platform to ensure that it's still the right platform for you. Now, I realize that at the top I have the Hive with Cortex. The Hive is a case management system. Cortex is the SOAR that comes with that case management system. In fact, it's a open source, which there is a pay model now through a company called StrangeBee. And it's a very, very good case management system. Cortex is a good SOAR platform. But then on the right side, you see XSOAR Cortex. This is what was formerly known as Demisto, but then purchased by Palo Alto Networks and put in place. So don't let those kind of confuse you. Again, going back to all of these different platforms have their own advantages and disadvantages. And to the point I was making earlier about looking at what gives you the most bang for the buck right out of the box for those quick wins. Look for the no code automation. You may be hearing a lot in the industry these days that a lot of people will say there's no such thing as no code. Well, there is such thing as no code. But if you have the capability to code and you have somebody that's highly technical that can understand how to do some code, you can even take those no code platforms and add some code and make something even stronger. So expect there to be at least some level of coding to make a really effective SOAR and automation program for your team. Now, again, you see a lot of these different ones. You have to think as well about how they work between your other tools. Now, keep in mind, SOAR and automation are going to have communication to a lot of your different tools and a lot of your different technologies. So if a particular platform doesn't play nice with another platform, you may find yourself writing a lot of code to kind of shoehorn some of that technology to work together. And frankly, there's going to be that kind of pain point with almost all of these platforms. However, there's also going to be different degrees of that pain point. Some will work a lot better with others based on each one. So when you're talking to a potential SOAR vendor, you want to speak with them about, hey, let's see what kind of capabilities you have between your platform and my EDR. This is the EDR that I have. I want to see what capabilities you have. And of course, on the front end, when you're talking to a salesperson, they're trying to represent a very positive light to their product. They're trying to go and get you as a partner, as a customer. And I'm not saying they're lying to you, but there's a good opportunity to turn to them and say, I'd like to see in your library of workflows that have already been built how your SOAR interfaces with my EDR. And look at it. Look at the capabilities that it has as you're evaluating these platforms. Don't just take their word for it that yes, I can contact your EDR and get and query for these things, make this action, do this activity, etc. Ask them to see what the workflow looks like. Ask them to see what the overall end-to-end sample workflows look like. As well as keep in mind too that you may already have a technology. I mentioned this before. You may already have a technology that has SOAR capabilities built into it. If you're, for instance, a CrowdStrike customer, you could potentially turn on their Falcon Fusion SOAR capabilities, and you have SOAR capabilities. Again, though, beware of like these bolt-on options where SOAR is added as an afterthought. It's added as a value add, but it doesn't really add a ton of value because that company's focus may be in other areas. It may be that they're primarily focused over on this capability and this type of technology, that when they do go and roll out some sort of SOAR capability, they might be just rolling it out to say, we have SOAR. Or they bought another third party, they added it in, and then they never made any additional developments after that because it's not really within their business. So remember, some of those kind of things have happened in the past. And I'm not saying that, I'm not calling out anyone specifically on this slide. I'm just saying do your investigation when you're trying to select that SOAR platform, making sure that it has all the capabilities and features that you want. Again, going back to having a clear strategy for for how you want to approach SOAR. What is your SOAR strategy going to look like? So you've got the platform. Now you're trying to get adoption. One of the biggest things that I've seen, company goes out, purchases SOAR, bring it in. They say, okay, now go automate everything, get everything automated. And your automation engineers, or even just your SOC and your security engineers, go in and they start building out a workflow. They build one full workflow and it doesn't work, or one section doesn't work and it kind of causes a hiccup for everything afterwards. Or it takes 6 months to roll out that first workflow, and every additional workflow will take another 3 months. So by this point, you've got one workflow that may save a few thousand hours that 1 year, but is it really going and adding value to everyone overall? Instead of doing that, look at what's repeatable. Look at what keeps happening every single time a particular alert is fired. And I'll have some examples of what this looks like. But obviously, okay, ticket is created, but what kind of information is queried from other sources and then added to the ticket for enrichment? And I'm not just talking about general SIM enrichment, I'm talking about overall enrichment from other sources. You have a SOC analyst that receives an alert. That alert says, hey, this is a potentially malicious phishing email. Go out and gather email information from Virus Total. Go grab information from the threat intelligence platform. Grab information from all these different sources and pull it all in and populate the ticket with all of this information. Again, we'll go into a little bit more of what that looks like. But using the same scenario, you don't have to right off the bat in your very first iteration of a workflow automate all the way from somebody reports phishing all the way to, okay, I've deleted the email. Instead, find what areas you need to go through and automate in sections and roll out those automations in sections. Make sure things are working, and then just add on additional capabilities for particular workflows. If you do that as well and kind of take this modular approach to your workflows, you will also find too that as attacks are changing, or as these different workflows are changing, it makes it much easier to update and manipulate or improve upon different sections as opposed to having to improve the entire workflow from beginning to end. Having that broken up really helps out as well. So I mentioned that phishing email report. You've gone to your SOAR provider. You've gone to a SOAR provider and you say, hey, we're thinking about getting your SOAR platform. In my experience, 75 to 90% of the time when the salesperson comes in, the first thing that they are going to try and sell you on is investigating phishing email reports. Why? Because your SOC most likely deals with a lot of them. at least most SOCs, many SOCs that I've seen, deal with a lot of phishing reports. It's a very manual, intensive process. If you're doing it and having to respond back to the user is always a pain in the butt. Going through and doing these, when you're getting users that are just using the report phishing button, thinking that, oh, this will put somebody on a block list. So they're reporting every piece of spam, which is really not like spam reporting. They're just thinking that if I click report phishing, I'll never have to see this again. So here you've got one of the most common, in my opinion, workflows to go after for a low-hanging fruit to realize value very quickly. In fact, on the right-hand side, you see a sample from the platform Tines of a workflow for somebody reported phishing. Tines goes through, reads the email, goes through a few steps on the left-hand side for analysis, and then going over to check reputation. And this is a very small section of one of their sample email phishing workflows. So these are some of the steps that's taken during that triage phase of a phishing email report. Now, what if you were to go and integrate with your CMS? Okay, here's a simple integration right here. Any system can go, and even if you just had it where you had some sort of paid phishing capability, that when somebody clicks, whether it's Fish Me or it's one of the other different phishing reporting systems, they're going to have integration with CMS. Okay, so that doesn't seem like a huge deal. But if you do it through your SOAR, you can then also have your SOAR acknowledge back to them, hey, yeah, we've received this, and somebody's going to look into this. Which, by the way, extremely important. When you have users, if let's say you have thousands of users in your environment, which is typically what I have when I've worked for these large enterprises, I'll have thousands of users in the environment and they want to know that somebody has received it. So you send a Slack message or an email to say, okay, hey, acknowledge I received it. Somebody's looking at this or something is going on with this, and you'll get a notice back. I'll talk more about notifying folks once the analysis is done as well. Then you have your SOAR querying your CMS, going through and querying your mail system. Make sure it's querying as well your potentially your proxy servers or your outbound firewalls. Make sure it's going through and checking potentially your threat intelligence platform to look if there are any known IOCs within that particular phishing email. When we start doing all this, you can start to recognize how quickly you can get adoption because you've taken this and there's an average of 45 minutes per report. And we'll talk about what that looks like on a larger scale. But if you're turning this to your SOC analyst and saying, hey, I can take 45 minutes off of your plate every single day when there is a phishing report, they're going to be all in. They're going to jump on that. And again, we're talking about trying to get people to adopt this as a cultural shift and getting people to start thinking about automation from the perspective of how can I stop doing these manual things that are quite a bit of brain drain because I'm constantly doing the same thing over and over and over again, and getting the machines to do it instead. Then you can look at other phases as well. I talked in detail about the triage phase, but you can look at the analysis phase as well. You're going out, you're verifying IP addresses, links, hashes, etc., to go and analyze, is this actually phishing? Does this actually look like this is a phishing email? You can also go and query against your EDR, looking at who has communicated to that. Then we get into our containment and mitigation phase. This is the step, at least these first two items in this list, this is the step where you need to be very cautious. You need to become confident that your workflow is not firing any true positives because you don't want to go and block anything or quarantine anything. Obviously, you can take steps where nothing can be undone. You can always go and roll something back if you get a whole bunch of emails that are quarantined, pull them back in or unblock a URL or unblock a domain. But you go and block things like that, and there is going to be an impact, at least for a minimal amount of time, where issues are happening. So those first two, make sure you're very confident before you start putting in some of those, like automatically go block. What we did was, when we got to that containment phase or that quarantine phase, the SOAR platform would put a recommendation into the case management system, into the ticket, that yes, we recommend quarantining these emails. We recommend blocking all of these emails. And in some cases, it will even set up a capability for, it could drop a note into Slack and say, would you like to block these URLs, domains, IPs? The analyst goes through, verifies all the work, says, yes, I think all of these look like they should be blocked, execute, and it will go through and then push. I mentioned that I was going to talk about the communication after the fact. One of the biggest things about trying to encourage a positive security culture, not only within your security org, but also throughout your company, is having a good communication and having good feedback. We do these phishing training regularly once a year because it's a requirement. We go through and do a phishing training. But how do you reinforce that phishing education? By going through and saying, yes, you reported something and this was phishing. Good job. You did great. Maybe I send an email to your manager as well and say, hey, this person, Bob over here in accounting, it's always Bob from accounting, went and reported this phishing email and he caught the phishing email. Kudos, congratulations, etc. Really celebrate it because it's those regular wins that go and reinforce that positive behavior, as well as it improves the outlook of working with security. If I'm an end user and I go and report something and I get kudos back from, hey, I just reported this issue to security, that tells me that security is approachable. They're not this evil, these guys, these folks over there that are just going to, slap my hand when I do something bad, or they're going to get mad at me when I click an email accidentally or click a link accidentally or something like that. Instead, I'm getting a positive interaction with working with those teams, and that will encourage me to go and work with or report things more regularly, which is what you want to keep people doing. We're looking at the post-incident phase as well. Now, again, here's a sample report of a post-incident report. And this is an example of once the overall investigation of an incident is done, can we go and do a post-incident report for this particular incident, talking about what happened, when it happened, who was involved, who reported it, and then talking about what the overall scope and the findings are. I'm sure many of you on this call have written many of these reports, and you have some sort of form where you have to go through and fill everything in, and it takes forever to go through and summarize everything into a manner where it is clear, concise, it follows with a format that people are very familiar with. We'll talk more about that in just a second. Ensure that people know where to find the information within the report that's coming in, and it has relevant information. Why not use generative AI to do that? Well, of course, you don't want to go and start pumping instant information out into a public generative AI, just into your public chat GPT. But if you have some sort of a dedicated LLM, if you have some sort of enterprise generative AI, you can make this actually happen. And again, this report can go to leadership, it can go to key stakeholders, it can go to legal, all of those things. Now, we'll get into a little bit more about using generative AI, but let's first look at the metrics that are saved. So let's say 2.75 people hours per report. That's based on what I just showed you, the number of hours, not even including really the post-incident report. Let's say you have 6 reports per day. I have found that once you start giving users a positive experience about reporting phishing emails, all of a sudden the level of reports go up. So no good deed goes unpunished. If you go and do a good job, people are going to give you more work to do, but that's okay in this situation with automation. If you've got that workflow automated and it's doing all of the steps where you maybe don't even ever have to touch that ticket or touch that report, then you're getting more reports. You have better capability for going and identifying those phishing emails. You have the potential to save almost 1,500 people hours per quarter, which again, we're talking about this is people hours saved that is repeatable processes. This is taking that time off of the shoulders of the people that have so much stuff already on their plate. By automating it, you're taking away some of that menial work that they really don't want to be doing in the first place. You're replacing it with AI, and then you're saying, okay, now go do the cool stuff instead and stop doing the stuff that we don't like. We've also been looking at suspicious user activity, whether that's DLP alerts or some sort of user behavior analytics. Again, you could potentially go and see. I find DLP to be extremely noisy, and particularly when you first roll it out until you can really tune it appropriately. You end up with a lot of alerts, a lot of false positives, a lot of things like that. Using automation, you definitely can cut down on the amount of work that goes on with DLP. And I'm not just saying automate everything and assume everything is a false positive. You can actually get through and do quite a bit of very useful work. And then again, if you have HR or legal reaching out for elevated monitoring, if that's a situation, you could realize as well some time saving there as well, which that also obviously goes and benefits the HR and legal teams that may be reaching out to you to go and put some of these detections in place. Because if that's automated, they have a form they can fill out, it goes and automatically starts things up. It gives them a report regularly on what's going on, etc. It's out of your hands at that point as well. Now, don't just use the metrics that are built into your platform. I don't think that they're useful. This is an example from a particular platform that I don't think that metric is a very useful metric in the context of time saved. I like to pull my own data, pull it directly from my case management system, and produce those metrics appropriately based on the metrics that I just showed you. Now, moving further into building this culture. Yeah, I mentioned before, make sure you have sufficient technology. It's like anything, if your son or daughter asks you for a bicycle and you go and buy a used bicycle off of Craigslist and it's rusty and it's got a rusty chain and the brakes don't work, your kid's not going to want to ride that bicycle. It's not going to be fun to ride. They're going to be embarrassed in front of their friends and stuff like that. Now, also, if you go out and buy like, some sort of racing machine that the kid doesn't actually race or anything like that and put them on that bike, it might be too advanced for the kid, and because it's so advanced the kid ends up crashing a lot because it can't ride it appropriately, it doesn't have the skill set to ride such an advanced bicycle. But if you get the appropriate bike for the kid's going to be want to ride it, it's going to be enjoyable to ride, it's not going to be a pain to ride, they're going to be proud of it in front of their friends when they're riding around the neighborhood. My point is, find the right technology and spend the right amount of money to make sure that it's the correct one. Don't just buy the cheapest thing. Then go and ensure that people understand that there's an expectation that they need to be building automation workflows. You don't necessarily have to turn to everyone and say, I want you to automate one thing per quarter. That's not really an appropriate goal. Although, when you say, hey, everyone, it is your responsibility to create automation workflows, and then you come back and you celebrate the automation workflows that have been created and you show the metrics and the impact that it's having already, everyone will want to adopt it. Everyone will want to do it. So definitely leverage that as well. When people start telling you, there's this thing we've been working on and it's such a pain in the butt, it just takes me so much time, automate it. Go in and automate it. Man, that sounds like a perfect opportunity for automating. And you start to get people thinking in a solution area. And obviously, you need to listen to people's gripes first and not just go and offer solutions. I've been told that I do that way too often, but it is a very good area to have people thinking about that as well. And then ask them, what about this job is just boring? It's something you don't want to be doing. That is a good place to really turn to people and say, oh, well, is there an opportunity for automation there? Or is there some place where we can go and make the machines do it instead? Now, I mentioned we were going to get into AI as well. AI and machine learning have been part of our security tools for a very, very, very long time, and it's not really something totally new. Obviously, generative AI changed a lot of the things and the capabilities around AI. That's changed quite a bit. Um, but again, everyone has run into issues with generative AI hallucinations. Everyone's run into issues with potential AI exposures. Make sure that you're following within your own internal. Hopefully, your company has an AI policy. Make sure you're following within your AI policy and you're protecting your company and not creating a new exposure. You want to make sure that you're monitoring what's coming out. Obviously, if you're generating some sort of uh, response to a prompt, or if you have a prompt that generates something, and that comes internal to your own internal team, that's a very easy thing to do. You can go and look at it, review it, and say, does this look accurate? You check your work, and if you do it right, you can check your work. And then you can go back and say, okay, I can use this. Just like anything, you're going to AI to kind of give you a starting point that you can build off of. And I'll have some examples of what that looks like in just a moment as well. So one use case I was going to talk about was generative AI as a CTI team. If you go and take the Forensic 578 class, uh, Rob Lee and and company created a really great curriculum where they talk about quite a few very high level things, but they talk about some very deep cyber threat intelligence research capabilities. One of the high level things that he really focuses on is ensure that your reports, your threat intelligence reports, are uniform. Your audience needs to understand where to go to in your report to get key information. Sometimes you have people that read your reports that just jump to those key points, read those bullet points, and don't read anything else. So if you always have it in the same place, it will make a much better experience for your reader. So here we have a few different examples of how you could use generative AI in the capability of some CTI functions. This is not going to replace your CTI team. I'm going to tell you that right now. CTI teams do a lot more work as well. But if you don't have an internal CTI team and you need to have some additional CTI capabilities, this at least goes and kind of plugs that gap a little bit. So having this capability to create some sort of report based on a third-party vendor breach or some sort of geopolitical activity that's happening, or travel advisories as you're going out. I'll show you some of these examples in a moment. So in our case study, a very smart gentleman in my team named Mohammed Faisal created our platform that we call Cacti, which is a cyber fusion center AI cyber threat intelligence. So here it is, our CTI platform. You can go in and basically put in a topic, and you may be asking, okay, well, what's the difference between this and just going to ChatGPT and say, tell me about the threat intelligence around DeepSeek or around this particular CVE? And the answer is I go back to standardized format. Number one, you have a particular format that's very standardized. You've pre-configured the temperature of the response. You've pre-configured the format that's coming out. You've pre-configured certain information that you want it to produce for me that's essential to my particular company, as opposed to just being generic output from ChatGPT. There's so often that I can see a report, and I'm not saying I've got, AI whisperer where I look at a report and I go, oh, this was written by ChatGPT, but we all see it now. We're starting to get so used to it that we can see this was written by ChatGPT, and you just put in a prompt that just said CVE, blah, 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 and that was it. You didn't actually give it any other context whatsoever on what information is useful to the reader. So that's where we really built this in, or Faisal actually built this into our capabilities to ensure that there was relevant information to my company and to the reader. So not only that, he also created daily reports that come out that are relevant to leadership about current CTI reports, and then relevant to the more technical people on the team with IOCs, et cetera. So making sure you have relevant reports for both. So I'm sure you've heard recently about this CVE as it's related to, I hope you've heard about this Google Chrome sandbox escape CVE that came out. I actually went through and ran this report last night to make sure I had relevant current data on what's going on with this particular CVE. What you can see is, just like every threat intelligence report, what's important is you have that executive summary at the top. What is right here? So as a leader, as a senior director, I can come in and start reading that executive summary. Okay, I know what's going on. All right, wait, this could impact us. If we have Google Chrome in our environment, I should read the key points as well. Okay, that's interesting as well. Okay, this could be big for us. I should go into the threat overview. I should understand the business risk as well. How do I communicate this out? Where this is extremely useful for me, and I'm sure you've all run into it, in particular cybersecurity leaders, is that your CISO or your CTO or your CEO or anyone that has C in their title or anywhere, or even somebody in an adjacent department comes to you and said, hey, I know we're using Google Chrome in our environment. I just saw in the New York Post that there's this, new vulnerability. What are we doing about it? Or what is the vulnerability? Because of course they saw a headline somewhere that said new critical vulnerability for Google Chrome allows for sandbox escaping. Oh my God, that sounds terrible. That sounds super scary. How does that impact us? What's the real threat? But they don't actually read the article. They just read the headline and ingest the bumper sticker, as we call it, and then don't really go and look at the rest of the article, which is fine. That's why they have me. They come to me and they say, hey, tell me what's going on with CV 2025 2783. And I don't know about you, but I don't memorize every single CV number. I have a few that are burned indelibly into my brain because of having to go through and do incident management as well. But I need to go and I need to get a proper report that provides relevant data to me so I can speak accurately to those people. Sometimes I go and run the report, I send it to them, and then I call them and say, hey, this is actually what's going on with it. I sent you a detailed report, but at a high level, here's how it works, and here's what's happening with it. And here's the potential business risk. I am confident with this data because I know that my team has built out a platform that produces not only reliable data, but then also data that I can go and verify. You see at the bottom here, this is the second half of the report. At the very bottom here, I have references. I can go back and say, well, I don't know if that's right. Let's go back and look at the actual CVE database and look at what is the actual what's the actual source talking about. And this is where I become more educated on this kind of quick wins for what do I need to know to be able to answer that hallway question. I know I'm working remote, but hallway question when somebody pings me on Slack and asks me, what are we doing about this? What is the threat intelligence related to this? What should we be doing? Do we need to go patch this right away? Or do we need to go and update Google Chrome in this situation to be able to mitigate this? And, my answer can be a confident, yeah, I really think we should. I think we should go out there and do that. Now, in addition to that, we want to keep an eye on geopolitical events that are going on. We have a remote team that has people traveling quite a bit. In my situation, I'm traveling out to Canberra tomorrow, and I'll be there next week to teach a class for SANS to teach LDR 512. So before going out to Canberra, I'm going to, because I've never been there, I've been to Australia, but I've never been to Canberra. I'd like to know, are there any safety concerns that I should be aware of? What do I need to know about Canberra? As opposed to going around Googling, going to the State Department's website, which if the State Department doesn't have much to say about it, it's not going to really say anything about it. This is going to give me a high level. Okay, maybe in certain areas, certain more touristy areas. Okay, maybe keep your valuables close to you. Okay, that's sure maybe some common sense for anyone that's traveling. But it gives me a general sense of what the atmosphere is going to be like. Well, on top of that, we had one of the managers on my team had a son who was traveling for baseball in Canada, and while he was in this area of Canada, he got really sick. And here in the United States, you dial 911, or there's going to be a hospital really close by. Down at the bottom here, you see healthcare and medical facilities. Like, where are the closest hospitals to Canberra, or where are areas that you can go to the hospital? It also right above that says, hey, if you have an emergency, dial 000. I didn't know that. I didn't know that before going to Australia, that's how I call my emergency services. So this gives me a really high level report. We started producing this report to leadership, and then we started thinking, well, there's more information that we can do. What do you need to have before you go there? Hey, let's go ahead and turn in, let's add, I know it's not cybersecurity related, but as opposed to having people go and like dig around and start looking at other, you know, top attractions, or turning it into a bit of uh, a, a tourist recommendation as well. Okay, I realize this is not cybersecurity, but heck, this ends up being one report that they possibly might end up reading a little bit. And then when they get to the end, they can go, okay, what are also my local customs and etiquette? This was based on some feedback that we had from other people. What did this do for us? This encouraged additional interaction with our outside stakeholders, including our executive leadership team that does a significant amount of travel. And we want them to be aware and be safe when they're traveling. We also want them to be able to, you know, adhere to local customs and etiquette. How do they actually, survive and enjoy their travel while they're out there? But again, it's providing additional value to our stakeholders to go and say, hey, it took us only a few minutes to add this to our prompt to be able to go and output this all to your report. And it's something that people end up using before they go and travel somewhere. Obviously, I used it to understand what it's going to look like when I go out to Canberra next week and understand what I should expect and how I should act while I'm out there. So I get it. What we're trying to do is encourage culture, even if it's not necessarily just part of cybersecurity. We want to encourage people to approach us. We want to be a partner to the folks that we work with to give them useful information or to work with them to keep them safe on the front end. But if we add a little bit more information that helps them to keep coming back, okay, fine. I'm fine with it as well. So to summarize, we talked a lot about strategy, knowing what works for your team. That might take, oh, we're going to do, or you might take a decision on a particular strategy that you might need to revisit. If it's not working out, you need to go back and revisit. Be ready to pivot if you have to and make adjustments to that strategy. Obviously, you don't want to start something, get a year in, and then scratch the whole thing out and say, this just isn't working and throw it away and then start over. You might end up frustrating your team because they put a lot of work into standing up a soar platform and now they have to go back and redo it. It's also not only acceptable to automate portions of the workflow, I highly encourage it. You don't necessarily need to do the entire workflow. Chunk it out, do sections. It obviously improves the capability for seeing what's working. It allows you to realize value a lot quicker. It allows you to take a little bit of time off of person's uh, that person's workload so that they can apply more of it towards automation. If they're spending hundreds of hours going and doing these investigations, and they can cut that down to half the amount of time. They can take that time that they just saved and apply it towards doing more automation, keep cutting down more and more of that time. And then even what we've seen is as we cut down a lot of that time, it allowed us to go back and retune a lot of our alerts and cut down on the input as well. So we've seen where that's actually allowed us to overall kind of create this flywheel of improvements where one thing leads to another, that overall improvements are happening. Definitely try to find the low hanging fruit. What are we doing over and over and over again? What are we not like doing? Let's go after those things first so that we can get adoption as well as we can make an impact as quickly as possible. Get people thinking about automating first as opposed to try and just conduct the investigation. Yes, you have to conduct the investigation if it's going on, or doing the work if it's going on at that time. But trying to identify what of this can I go through and automate so I don't have to keep doing this thing. Beware on this one because I have also seen where it could go a little bit too far to the other side, where people start thinking, oh, I've got this false positive firing. I'm just going to go and automate the response to that. It's like, okay, well, we kind of need to go back and like tune the false positive, which, yes, you might need the time saved by not investigating all those false positives to automate as well. So you might have to automate it so you can save the time so you can go back and tune. Okay, there's benefits both ways. When you get AI into the mix and you have a clear AI policy that you're adhering to, you have the capabilities with generative AI, get that into the mix. One of the next use cases that we want to do is as we're beginning, when we have a security event, as we're beginning the investigation, and we bring everyone together into a Slack channel, and everyone's investigating and coordinating within that Slack channel. Every hour or 2 hours, or at the end of the investigation, somebody has to go and summarize, hey, this is everything that's going on with the investigation. This is a current status. And they need to email it over to leadership, to myself, so I can understand where we are. So I'm not jumping into the Slack channel and saying, hey, who can give me a current status? Hey, somebody give me a current status. We're looking at using generative AI to basically be a chatbot. Watch within that chat channel and say, hey, here's a snapshot of everything that's going on right now. Summarize what's happened in the last hour. What are the open action items? And even those open action items can go over to your case management system to say, hey, these are the current tasks that are still being open. So as to take a little bit more of that manual effort off when you're in the midst of an investigation or in the midst of an incident. And then even at the very end, write me an entire summary of everything that happened within that channel. Now, again, as we're building that out, we're not just going to start firing off these reports and saying, hey, this is exactly what's happening in our investigation, because we know there's going to be errors. We're going to have to go and train it. We have to make sure that things are accurate, in particular when you're in an incident, and these things could be discoverable by law. They could be something that you're held to. It could be a source. You don't want to be a source of truth. You want it to produce basically your summary or your outline that you can go and read over and say, yes, this looks correct. Okay, now I ship it off to leadership. Again, look outside of security for errors for areas to automate. We found a great opportunity within our site reliability and engineering team within SRE. We found areas within HR when they're submitting requests to us, if they have to give some sort of internal approval from leadership to do a particular activity, we can bolt that leadership approval work into the workflow itself, where leadership gets a Slack message, hey, this activity is being requested. Do you approve? Yes, boom, that gets documented in the ticket. The leadership approves, yes, this activity happens. There's quite a few other things you can do there as well. Don't just look at what you're doing. Try to find value for other areas. And as I mentioned before, your SOAR tool may be the appropriate tool for you right now, and you may be super happy with it. But there's constant innovation going on there as well as everywhere else. Make sure you're going back and looking at your tools on a regular basis to make sure you know which is the appropriate tool for your team. Again, going back to the bike analogy, you bought your kid a bicycle. They're riding this bicycle, and eventually they're getting larger. Their knees start to hit the handlebars, or something like that is just not working out for them. And so go back and review. Do we need to find a better bicycle for our kid? And the answer is possibly. Maybe they still like that bike, and maybe they're still happy with it. Maybe it's just fine, but maybe they're starting to show, Olympic caliber, and maybe it is time to go to that really advanced bike. They've gotten to that point where maybe if you did get them an upgraded bike, you could improve their capabilities as well. So regularly review what you're using and make sure that it's the right tool for the job, and making sure that you haven't outgrown your particular capability. With that, I'm going to say thank you, everyone, for joining. Again, I haven't seen any questions come through just yet. If there are any questions, please feel free to drop them into the chat. We have some great upcoming LDR 512 courses. I did mention earlier that the LDR 512 is one of the courses that I teach. It's the Cybersecurity Essentials for Leaders. Would love to see you in California with Meenop, Colorado with myself. Kevin Garvey is going to be out there in Paris, and Frank Kim, the course author, is going to be out there in DC for Sandsfire. So I'm going to ask you, did you hear any questions in the chat at all that I should be taking a look at?
No, I have not. It's been a great group. Thank you all for attending. And the recording of this webcast will be available in about 72 hours. And if you go back to the registration link, you will be able to download the slide around that time period as well.
All right. Well, with that, we'll go ahead and close out, give everyone a couple minutes back. I appreciate you joining me today, and I hope you have a great day. Please feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. Happy to answer any questions as is related to this, or just chatting about cybersecurity in general. All right, everyone, have a great day.